looking at the warrant, picking out probably the biggest headline article would be the State Theater. So explain to me where that is right now, and why the Board of Selectmen decided to get involved in the way it's getting involved right now.
Well, I can probably answer your sort of second question first. In the spring, the board voted to put together the Downtown Task Force, and that group is comprised of the town's Economic Development Director, Pam McCarthy, the interim town manager, Mark Tisdale, and then representatives from the various groups in town, that committees and boards in town that would be involved in helping with the redevelopment of the downtown, including a representative from the Planning Board, the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, and 2 members of the community who are both a local commercial broker and a property owner in the downtown. And so the charge of that group is really to spur economic development in our downtown so that we can start making it this town center that we envision through our master plan and our downtown development plan. So that group has a number of initiatives that it's pursuing, and part of those deliverables and objectives include ensuring there is a draw to the downtown. As through our research and what we've seen in other successful downtowns, and especially the New England area, is there's one main reason for residents to come to the downtown that then allows businesses and restaurants to thrive. So in Norwood, for example, they have their recreation facilities in the downtown, so that draws their residents there, and the other businesses surrounding that have really been successful as a result. So we envision in Stoughton the theater being sort of that linchpin and that key anchor tenant to the rest of the development and success of those local restaurants and businesses. So really the sort of part of this is that this task force sees theater as an integral step in terms of having the downtown revitalized. And it's also articulated in every master plan and study that has been done on the downtown up to this point. So there's no question that it's an important piece to actually having a successful Stoughton Center at this point.
So going about and acquiring it, right now, correct me if I'm wrong, the current property owner of the theater is threatening potential demolition of the theater. And so at this point, you're looking for the town through the Board of Selectmen to step in and essentially save the theater. Is that correct?
That's a good way to put it. So our preference would be that the property owner would change his thinking. Our preference would be to engage with the property owner, which we've tried to do and continue to try to do. Even as late as today, I was on the phone trying to pursue getting things set up, and hopefully a meeting will happen. That's been tried and hasn't been successful, but we get some sense that there's a willingness to meet. So that would be the ideal way to do it, because there are things that a private property owner can do, and there are things that the town can do with a private property owner to make it work. But as Christine was saying, getting the theater up and running has been a real pivot point in the downtown redevelopment since the master plan work began. And if you look at other communities where the theaters have come back, you see the benefit that has thrown in those areas, which is what we're looking to have. So we see, as a policy statement, the town has said through the master plan, Planning Board adopted, the Board of Selectmen adopted, it's been sent to the State Department of Economic Development. So this is our announced, this is what we would like to achieve. We learned about the potential demolition, I can't remember exactly when, but it might, sometime in August, I think.
And I just want to clarify that the owner, because I think a lot of people might assume that the owner of the building's the Friends of the State Theater. They're actually not. They're just tenants.
They're tenants.
Right.
They're tenants.
So, as you were saying, in August.
So in August, I think it came to our attention that there was a clear intent to demolish the building. And if you demolish it, it's not possible to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Mm-hmm. And so my own view is on a number of things, especially since this is a clear articulated vision that the town has had, that came through a number of visioning studies. I think you were at some of them.
Mm-hmm.
When the master plan was done, we had, citizens coming. We had many visioning plans. If this is something that's going to happen, that is, we lose the theater, it should be an affirmative decision by town meeting to say, we're going to lose it, and we understand we're going to lose it, and town meeting is okay with it. Rather than, I think, what has sometimes happened, which is stuff happens, a decision, people think a decision wasn't made by the town, but it was. And that decision was, we're not going to do anything. And as a result, we don't anticipate the consequences. We don't decide the consequences. So our view, our vision is the theater should be saved, it should be restored, and the way to do that is go to town meeting. And the timing is such that we don't think we have the luxury of time to let this wait. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it in a fall special town meeting.
So once the town meeting votes on this, or town meeting, I should rephrase that. What is town meeting being asked to vote on? Because I was looking at the warrant article, and the dollar amount that's listed would not fully fund the renovations of the theater. It's merely funding the acquisition
That's right.
of the
Yes.
theater. So how much money are we talking about that the town would either be borrowing or using CPC funds potentially?
Well, the idea is for the funding to come from the CPC fund, the Community Preservation Committee, and I'll say the middle name is preservation. All right? So you're preserving a historical site in the town, you're preserving a cultural site in the town, and you're promoting an economic development site in the town. So that would be the acquisition funds. There are, and Christine is more familiar on this than I am because this is work that the downtown committee is doing, but the acquisition is what's going to give us the opportunity to put the funding together to redevelop it. One of the great things the Friends of the State Theater was able to do is to assemble ideas on how we go about getting it done. And what we're trying to do is pick up from that work and continue it.
So is this the figure that's cited in the warrant article is 1.6 million? Is that still the figure that you would be asking for a town meeting to approve?
Yes.
Okay. And so now let's say that it's passed and the town has the building and it has acquired the building. What's next? Where does the Friends of the State Theater, that group, play into this? Who becomes the day-to-day operator of or overseer of the building? Is this, because I think that's where kind of a lot of people have questions is, that towns don't usually go into the theater business. And so who runs this once the town acquires it?
Yeah, so there's no intent for the town to be in the theater business. So you're very right in stating that point. And I think also what you're kind of alluding to is the big number, the big question of what the renovation and rehabilitation costs look like. At this point, we are somewhere in the range, based on the numbers we have from the Friends of State Theater's work and some work that we've done, somewhere between maybe 9 million, around 9 million, 7 to 9 million for full renovation to be completely historically renovated and rehabilitated.
And that's in addition, not to interrupt, but in addition to the 1.6 million acquisition?
That would be other funds that would be needed to
Okay.
accomplish that, so not acquisition. And I don't think the town is in the position to expect itself to pay for that. I don't think it's our intent to have the town pay for that or to use CPC or public funding to do that. Our goal is to have a public-private partnership, essentially, a nonprofit group in place that would be in charge of doing this capital campaign and this fundraising. And the idea is to open the theater sort of in phases even, so have it, ready to open on that first level while other renovations are happening on the balcony level or, additional fundraising is being done to complete the remainder of the renovations. And as Bob mentioned, what happens once the town acquires it, and this is either put into a grantor relationship with a trust or a nonprofit that's comprised of these other entities like the State Theater or other groups that have expressed interest, such as Old Colony Y. Once that happens, the grant opportunities and the funding opportunities are, the doors are opened. There's Mass Development provides bonding up to about $7 million for groups, nonprofits, something like the Stoughton Redevelopment Authority, or this group that would maybe take over once the town acquires the property. So those types of programs exist and are out there. Mass Cultural Council grants, economic development grants, and so really the big holdup at this point is the ownership and not having ownership of that building. So what we envision is once the town acquires it, to essentially turn it over to that group that would sort of manage that day-to-day and do the fundraising and capital campaign to get it ready to open so it can start recuperating some of that revenue.
Now, is that necessarily, just listening to the way you're wording that, that's not necessarily the Friends of the State Theater then?
At this point, I would say it's not necessarily the Friends of the State Theater, but they have been highly involved and are really one of the reasons that the theater is still in existence. They've been doing a ton of work over the last several years to set out a capital plan, to make connections with interested parties that would be able to come in and provide some funding or support for the programs. They have connections with other theaters in the area, and their group itself is very well versed and pretty deep in its knowledge. So they'll be involved. I think that's pretty clear that they will be involved in some capacity. Just because of all the information they have, the amount of work they've put into this, and all they've done to really preserve that building for the last however many years, 10 years or so. So I don't think it would be solely them, because there's a lot of other partners that the board has connected with recently that we can loop in. Recently in one of our meetings we appointed an advisory committee. I think Bob can speak about this a little further, but really that's a group of sort of industry experts that this future group can turn to and ask, say, how do we start, reaching out to large benefactors that we can, get to provide some funding. What type of programming do you think would be best in this? Or the programming we have set up, does that align? Or what connections do you have in these other communities so that we can work together? I think that's a benefit to expanding beyond the Friends of State Theater. And, when I've spoken with them, they just want to see that theater preserved and protected, and they're on board to participate in any capacity that we would want them to.
So let me walk you through the steps.
Sure.
So the steps, if this passes in town meeting, the first step would be for the Board of Selectmen to have an RFP drawn up and issued for a nonprofit to take over operating control of the facility, a nonprofit that would have the depth and strength and resources to make it go, a nonprofit that might have programming that they would want to offer there. We know because the president of Old Colony Y heard about this, and he stepped up and came to a joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and Redevelopment Authority to urge the town to not lose this opportunity and to indicate, and he even wrote us a letter saying they are interested in this role. So step up, a long-term operating control, because if we don't do that, this board is committed to making it work. We probably would, if it need be, man the ticket booth, if that would have took. But we don't want to do that, nor is that our function. So the first step would be to get the nonprofit in place. I see the Friends of Stoughton Theater as not quite having the capability to take on the operating control. That would mean running the renovations. That would mean taking care of the booking. That would mean offering all of that management stuff. But Friends of Stoughton Theater having a role in making sure that the integrity of the building, the historical aspect of it, and supporting the fundraising effort. And within that process, you have programming for the site developed. So if it's possible to phase the reoccupation of the building and get stuff up and running, the Friends of the State Theater would be involved, I hope, in evaluating that, but it actually be booked and run and managed and the rent collected and everything assured by the operating entity. And little by little, we'll get the thing back up and running. What we know from what we've heard from other theater operators, I've been in touch with them, Christine's been in touch with them, is it works. What we know from talking to the master plan consultants who worked with us and is that other communities would give both eye teeth to get a theater that they could get back up and running. So this group of advisors Steve Cavey deserves the credit for recruiting them, are people who have done it or are doing it in other communities with theaters that are either brand new or I think 2 theaters that are of the same vintage as ours, and they've made it work. And so they have a commitment and they're interested in helping us do it because they've done it before. And I'm sure it's not limitless, but what we hear is there's a limitless commitment to them. There's 4 areas that this theater gives us. One is the entertainment aspect, cultural, economic development, and then energy and sustainability. I see a great role for our energy and sustainability committee to become involved in this demonstration, making it work. Each one of those areas is a separate resource for funding to help redevelop it. Each has different grant and loan and financing opportunities, and with the right nonprofit engaged, we can connect into those. One thing that one of the larger nonprofits has told us is if we acquire it, they will work with us to connect us with their financial supporters to make it work. That's how committed people out there are, and what a difference it makes if the town acquires it, because if the town acquires it, they see it'll work.
At what point does the town kind of start to take some steps back, and once that nonprofit's in place, allows the nonprofit to run? What exactly would the relationship be? And I'll just use as an example. I'm not sure if viewers would be aware, but the Board of Selectmen hold Stoughton Media Access's charter. However, you're not involved in our day-to-day operations, but there have been other towns that have dissolved their cable access centers, board of directors, and just because it's not running the way they envision it. Is that the type of partnership you would see, that always that board of directors for the theater would always answer back to the Board of Selectmen, or is there a point where eventually they're their own independent entity, they're just a regular business, like you would have no other jurisdiction over them other than maybe granting a license for operation?
I mean, honestly, both options are possible. I think we envision having that closer oversight initially as it's underway. But there's nothing saying in 10, 15, 20 years that the board would need to continue oversight if it's a successful theater that has a strong relationship with the town and is providing all the things to it that we envision it doing. I mean, we would like to see the space open to community events in addition to just, potentially private acts or things like that. So I think that's the commitment we would expect from any of the partners involved as well.
And that's actually the sound. We initially were planning a 30-minute show. We still have some other topics. Do you have another 10 or 15 minutes to stick around? So
let me supplement that
Sure.
by saying, so the way to deal with this is with the RFP that we would issue. Mm-hmm. So we will, in our RFP for the nonprofit, identify what our goals would be by the entity that would take it on. My own view is that if we could sign the document that would turn over operating control, that would end town involvement with the facility, because the document will spell out what is the responsibility and expectation very clearly to the operating entity. And there are benefits to that for the town under the Community Preservation Act and under the own. There are financial benefits that would work, and then we would monitor. That's one of the reasons for a very clear RFP, and one of the reasons why, if we just use Old Colony, why, as an example, having a nonprofit with that strength stepping up and urging us and indicating, as they have in writing, that they are interested in that role is key. That tells me as a selectman that it is worth pursuing because you have a credible opportunity to go forward. So it would be really signing that document. To me, would be the end of town involvement. And then as the property becomes viable, we have a plan for payment in lieu of taxes, so that the operating cost to the community for providing police and other protection, fire safety, rescue, things like that are covered. So we make sure that's covered.
So I don't want to play glass half empty, but let's say two things. One, let's say town meeting does not vote in favor of this. What's the next step for the town to take? As I could tell from both of you, you're very passionate about this. You want the theater to be saved, and you believe it's a key to downtown revitalization. What if town meeting does not agree with you? Or I should rephrase that, does not agree with purchasing the theater, just doesn't want the town to get involved?
I mean, I think that would probably end town involvement, and then I think a group such as the Friends of State Theater would then continue to pursue their fundraising in an attempt to acquire the property. If that was the will of town meeting, then we'd have to sort of go by that. I would think that maybe if it fails in the fall, we maybe had some shortcomings and would get feedback and see if there's any information that maybe would be lacking that the residents would want to see before potentially presenting it again. But that would be a clear indication, sort of the affirmative decision that the town has decided that this is not important and they don't want to pursue its acquisition. I think we could still, support the groups such as Friends of State Theater and those of us that find that important to try to acquire it in another avenue. But as we've stated before, it's sort of at a critical juncture right now in terms of the things the town can do, working with the developer and then working with the nonprofit groups as we described in grant funding and so on. So I think it's, this is the point in time where we need to decide if we actually do believe this theater is important, as all of the plans have stated, and actually make that decision, take that affirmative step to either acquire it and save it or let it go.
There were three decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Or the decision will have three outcomes, three possible outcomes. One decision is, the path to, I'm convinced it will work, I'm all in. The second is, I don't know. But I understand there are consequences, and those consequences are all unacceptable. And so if you take the first one and the second possible outcome, they say acquire the theater, because at a minimum you preserve your options, since the option that happens if you don't acquire it is unacceptable. And the third one is you will accept, as a community, whatever happens in the square, with another crater in the middle of the square, beyond the control of the town and the taxpayer and the businesses to control. To me, it's that simple. And so if you like the downtown the way it is, and you like the way that it's been progressing, you don't acquire the theater. Because you know that if we don't acquire the theater, what the direction of the downtown will be. But if you think we can and should do better, you acquire the theater because there's opportunity there. That if we don't take it, we will lose, and we will never, ever get it back.